Hi, once again, thank you for tuning in to our second episode of Students' Academic Challenges during a pandemic. So, Kimberly, how would you describe your academic schedule and classes for this semester?
It depends. I would say it depends. Schedule this semester is very different. I think in some ways you do have a lot more freedom. Like you get to choose when you want to do your work. You're inside all day, so there is a lot more freedom in that sense. In person, they tended to be around the middle of the day. But now, well, for one, I only have 2 classes that are, what's the term they use? Synchronous, meaning we get to see the class and the professors at a designated time in the week. And then my other 2 classes, we don't meet up at all. It's just kind of, you learn, here's the material you read all the material, you listen to the lectures at your own pace. You do have deadlines. But you don't get to really interact with your classmates besides the discussion forums, which kind of sucks. In some ways, I wish we did meet up, even if it was virtually, even if everyone had their screen with a blank avatar, no avatar, no background. Like, I think that would probably make my semester have felt better, is if we had just a meeting point for the professor and the students to all be together, because I think I kind of understand why professors chose to not make the classes synchronous. I think their reasoning was to make it easier on us by not forcing us to meet at a certain time in the week. But in my opinion, I think it makes it a little harder because it just makes everything feel a little more lonely, like you don't have that same, like, not that Zoom can ever give the same sort of connection as you did in person, but I think just having a Zoom class could have made this semester for me a little more smoother,
I think I can somehow relate to that, because having classes on Zoom create a sense of community. So yeah, I truly could relate to that. Like, I do prefer meeting rather than having independent study. Although how restless I am to meet, at least there is a sense of community and interactions during such lonely time. So the next question is, did the pandemic affect your attention or ability to focus on your studies?
Well, I've always struggled with attention, I think, since I was a kid. But no one really noticed it because I was always, considered to be a good student, a top student, very quiet, does her work. So I don't think anyone could have ever assumed that I had a problem with attention. So, like, say, for example, like, how right now we're talking to each other. Like, I know I'm prone to kind of fuzzying conversations out. Like, I'm paying attention, but the whole conversation can sometimes appear fuzzy to me. For no reason, really. So, and I think this pandemic, being inside and not really having the same kind of, at least visual support meaning like your friends, studying with your friends, studying with your classmates, like not having that kind of visual support made everything a lot more difficult. And like, there were things I used to do before the pandemic that I think helped my attention. I didn't know I was doing it, but things like exercising often, eating the right foods. For some reason, when the pandemic hit, when everything was like in the peak of the shutdown, it was like advised to not go outside and to wear a mask everywhere. I wasn't being active, and so when I cut that out of my life, it was very, very difficult to pay attention to anything. I think that kind of difficulty just became more apparent being by myself. It was so hard for me to go through an essay, like incredibly difficult, when it's so strange because I'm used to reading a lot. Like, I'm used to, some professors that assign you like 20, 30, 40 50 pages to read in like less than 2 days, you know.
Yeah.
And then to go to like having this difficulty of even going through a few pages is like, well, what's going on? You know, it's so concerning. You know, I wasn't even really distracting myself when I was trying to read those essays. Like, I was pretty good about turning off my phone, not really talking to anybody for distraction. And yet somehow things were just incredibly difficult. And it's, you know, then when you realize like, oh my goodness, it's, you know, so many hours have passed and I'm still on the same assignment or page or, you know, anything like that,